What? Drawing, that's not what you're doing, right? My voice trembles. 6-year-old Kelly grips a crayon in silence, relentlessly drawing on her doll's abdomen. This wasn't just a child's doodle. The strange patterns, the chaotic lines looked like twisted bruises, disturbingly eerie. No, it can't be. In that moment, I didn't miss the way Daniel, my son-in-law, averted his gaze. My daughter Taylor turned pale, frozen in place. Daniel's frantic attempt to smooth things over only emphasized the strangeness of it all. What kind of truth lies hidden in these crazed patterns Kelly has drawn? To protect my granddaughter's innocent smile, I stand up. I won't let this family relive another nightmare. I am Nancy, a 58-year-old housewife. In my sunlit workspace, I'm focused on finishing a new doll today. Each time I thread the needle, I put my thoughts into the fabric. This handwork has become my purpose in life and a source of comfort for my heart. What started as a hobby has now become a source of income that supports our living. My doll-making skills, in particular, have gained a good reputation, and I receive a fair number of custom orders. During a break, my eyes rest on a doll displayed on the shelf. It's a special piece I made 8 years ago when my daughter, Taylor, got married. This doll, modeled after Taylor, beautifully captures her gentle smile and kind eyes. When I gifted it as a surprise at her wedding, Taylor was delighted, and even my son-in-law, Daniel, admired the craftsmanship. After her marriage, Taylor moved in with her in-laws and continued working as an office clerk, and 6 years ago, my granddaughter Kelly was born. Kelly is a quiet but observant child, and she's been a source of hope for us. Creating adorable accessories and doll clothes for Kelly has become a joy for me, and my husband, Brad, a university professor, also cherishes the time he gets to spend with our granddaughter amidst his work. Amidst peaceful days, 4 years ago, Daniel's mother suddenly passed away. She had adored Taylor as if she were her own daughter, and her loss had a significant impact on the family. After that, the frequent visits from Taylor and her family came to an abrupt halt. We could feel the distance growing between us and Taylor's family. However, it would be a while before we realized a major change was hidden behind it. In the first year after Daniel's mother passed, we were told they were busy with returning condolence gifts and sorting through her belongings, and we understood. As the heir to his family's household, it was natural for Daniel to be tied up with various formalities. But even after that, they continued to avoid visiting, citing reasons like busy with work or not feeling well. Whenever we tried to visit them, we were similarly turned away. When I heard Taylor's voice over the phone, there was an awkwardness, and our conversations never flowed. The cheerful laughter that had once been so like her had completely vanished. With each call, a sense of unease grew heavier in my heart. Even so, Daniel regularly contacted us for money, with various excuses: Kelly's birthday, her entrance celebrations, or extracurricular activities. Wanting to keep some form of connection, we sent money as gifts each time. At the end of last year, my husband suggested, maybe it's time we go visit our daughter's house, but once again, we were turned down. At that moment, Taylor's voice sounded somewhat distressed. Brad furrowed his brows and murmured, "Something seems off about Taylor lately." With his years of experience as an education professor, he had a sharp intuition when it came to people. Then, in February of this year, the topic of Kelly's elementary school entrance day came up. Taylor called, requesting a substantial amount as a celebration for her entrance. Gathering my courage, I told her over the phone that I wanted to hand over the gift in person. Taylor hesitated for a moment, then said she would discuss it with her husband, Daniel, and hung up. As I waited for her response, countless worries swirled in my mind. Could it be that, like I once did, she was avoiding us to keep her distance from over-involvement? Or was there a more serious issue hidden behind it? Late the following night, an email from Taylor arrived, stating they would come to collect the gift directly rather than having us visit their home. And so, the day arrived for my daughter and her family to come home for the first time in 4 years. From early morning, I meticulously cleaned the house and bought ingredients for hamburgers, which Kelly loves. My husband, who usually spends his holidays in his study writing papers, sat beside me today, reading the newspaper. He acted casual, but I was sure he was just as curious about our daughter and her family. The doorbell rang, pulling my thoughts back to reality. When I opened the door, there they were, my daughter's family, whom we hadn't seen in 4 years. Taylor was thin and looked pale. Kelly, who had grown so much since turning 6, hid behind her mother. There was no trace of the lively 2-year-old she once was. Meanwhile, Daniel was as cheerful as ever. However, I couldn't help but sense a peculiar, artificial quality behind his smile.
It's been a while.
Taylor's voice sounded faint, as though it were trembling. Oh, Taylor. I moved to hug her impulsively, but Daniel gently placed his hand on her shoulder, stopping me. The gesture seemed casual, yet it also gave an impression of claiming ownership.
It's been too long, Nancy. I'm sorry we couldn't visit sooner.
Daniel's words were polite, but they felt empty. Come on in. As I led them to the living room, an odd feeling intensified. Daniel took off his coat, revealing a luxury brand watch, tie pin, and clearly expensive accessories. In contrast, Taylor wore simple clothes, with an old blouse that seemed ill-fitting and tight. Kelly's outfit was equally plain, and her shoes looked too small. My husband, who usually had a gentle demeanor, quietly observed the family. Today, however, he seemed to notice something, with a slight frown on his forehead. I could see his gaze shifting between Daniel's luxurious items and Taylor and Kelly's modest attire. That's a lovely watch, I commented. Daniel smiled proudly.
Ah, yes, it's a keepsake from my mother. It was passed down from my grandfather, who ran a company.
I had indeed heard that Daniel's grandfather had been a business owner. However, the watch looked recently purchased. More than that, the stark contrast between my daughter and granddaughter's modest appearance and Daniel's extravagance left me uneasy. Taylor's salary shouldn't be low. Why, then, was there such a disparity? Kelly, you've grown so much. Are you enjoying kindergarten? When I addressed my granddaughter, she instinctively hid further behind her mother.
Kelly, answer Grandma.
Taylor prompted her in a quiet voice, and Kelly barely nodded. There was no sign of the bright, lively child I remembered. At 2 years old, she used to sit on my husband's lap and ask him to read picture books, or play joyfully with the dolls I made for her. Kelly, would you like to see the doll I made a long time ago? To bridge the gap with my granddaughter, I took out a doll I had made in the likeness of my daughter years ago. Kelly was initially hesitant, but she showed interest in the doll and slowly approached.
Is this Mama?
She pointed to the doll modeled after Taylor. Yes, it's a keepsake doll I made in your mother's likeness. Kelly stared intently at the doll. Her gaze held something unsaid, something she couldn't express in words. Then, suddenly, she pulled crayons out of her bag and began drawing something on the doll's stomach.
Kelly!
As Daniel tried to stop her, my husband raised his hand to hold him back. "Oh, Kelly dear, if you're drawing, we have paper." Kelly silently gripped black and blue crayons, furiously drawing something on the doll's stomach with an intense expression. "Huh? This isn't just drawing, is it?" The rough lines she drew resembled distorted bruises, looking hauntingly eerie. "No, it can't be." I didn't miss the momentary flicker of panic in Daniel's eyes. Taylor's face turned pale, frozen in place. Daniel's attempts to feign composure only highlighted the abnormality. Then, my husband stood up.
"Taylor, come with me."
His voice held an unusual gravity. Taylor hesitated, and Daniel hurriedly tried to intervene.
No, Taylor's not feeling well.
"Be quiet."
With that one word from my husband, Daniel fell silent, and the atmosphere in the room changed. Daniel's polite facade crumbled in an instant. "Taylor, lift your shirt and show us your stomach." With trembling hands, Taylor slowly lifted her blouse. Oh. There, on her skin, were countless blue bruises, just like the markings Kelly had drawn on the doll. They varied from fresh bruises to old ones, discolored in shades of yellow and black, covering Taylor's body. Daniel turned pale and began making excuses.
Well, she fell down the stairs, that's all.
"Leave."
My husband's low voice echoed in the room. The tone was intimidating, far from his usual mild-mannered self. Daniel quickly got up and left. The heavy silence enveloped those of us left in the room. Kelly remained silent, hugging the doll tightly. Then, Taylor began to speak as if a dam had burst.
After Daniel's mother passed away, his father and Daniel both changed.
Why?
His father had been adopted into the family, so he never defied his wife. But he longed to be a dominant husband. So after Daniel's mother passed, he suddenly started controlling me and Kelly.
Daniel's father, who had craved authority in the family but hid in his wife's shadow, revealed his violent side once she was gone. Did Daniel just look the other way? After a pause, Taylor continued.
No. He joined in, too. If I made any small mistake in housework, he'd yell at me, and if he didn't like dinner, he'd hit me. I couldn't bear it anymore.
Moreover, she said she was restricted from going out, and even her contact with us was monitored. Initially, Taylor told herself that Daniel's behavior was due to the stress of his mother's death, but the situation only worsened. Why didn't you tell us?
I didn't want to worry you. I thought if I endured, he'd eventually change.
Taylor's words made my heart ache. Taylor, you must have suffered.
It wasn't just that, he took all my money, too.
At first, Daniel claimed it was for company networking, and began demanding nearly all of Taylor's salary. When that wasn't enough, he would borrow from us as well. The money, however, was spent on Daniel's luxurious lifestyle, expensive watches, brand-name clothing, even gambling.
And if I didn't comply, He'd threatened to hurt Kelly.
Her voice broke. She shared that there were times when Kelly's arm bore bruises from being struck. At that moment, Kelly, who had been silent, spoke softly.
Daddy is scary. Grandpa too is scary.
Taylor gasped at her daughter's words, and I was touched by Kelly's bravery. The markings on the doll were an SOS to save her mother. My 6-year-old granddaughter had conveyed the truth to us. Just then, a noise came from the entrance. Daniel had returned, reeking of alcohol and clearly drunk.
Taylor! What did you tell them?
He flung the door open and stormed in, yelling. Kelly screamed and hid behind Taylor. I froze in fear, but my husband calmly stood in front of Daniel, blocking his way.
Stop.
Stay out of this. This is a family matter.
The moment Daniel tried to grab my husband, something unbelievable happened. In an instant, Daniel was sprawled on the floor. Right before my stunned eyes, my husband had thrown Daniel down with ease. Though he appeared to be a gentle university professor, he had actually been practicing judo for many years. It was the first time I'd ever seen him perform a move, and it was truly impressive.
Remember this. You won't get away with this.
He shouted as he stumbled out, fleeing. Kelly clung to Taylor, trembling. I let out a deep sigh and looked over at my husband. Brad wore an equally tired expression, but a determined light shone in his eyes.
This isn't over.
His voice was quiet but resolute. I nodded. To protect Taylor and Kelly, we had to take serious action now. My husband recalled that one of his colleagues at the university knew a lawyer, and Brad immediately got in touch with him. That night, Taylor and Kelly stayed at our house. Kelly slept in my room, her doll clutched close beside her on the pillow. I woke up several times throughout the night, each time looking at Kelly's sleeping face. Thinking about the fear and sadness this small body must have endured filled me with a painful ache. As I whispered, "You're safe now," over and over, I resolved to protect her with all my strength. The next morning, Taylor spoke with determination.
I'm going to divorce Daniel.
From there, we moved forward with meetings with the lawyer, and the divorce proceedings with Daniel officially began. During the process, Daniel attempted to contact Taylor, continuing his threats and demands for money. We consulted with the police about these incidents, and we also started the process to obtain a restraining order if necessary. One day, the lawyer called to inform us, Daniel has expressed a willingness to settle. Hearing this news, I felt a sense of relief but also lingering anxiety. Will this really be the end? I wondered as I hung up the phone. That night, my husband and I discussed it. It seems Daniel is willing to settle, but can we really trust him? After a moment of thought, my husband replied, "Whether he's truly remorseful, I don't know, but legally, this should be the end of it." Yes, but if anything else happens? I voiced my worry, and my husband gently reassured me, if that time comes, we'll protect them with all we have. A month later, the day for the divorce meeting arrived. The designated location was a conference room at a law office managed by a friend of my husband's. The room, on the 15th floor of a high-rise, exuded a solemn atmosphere. Taylor's husband, Daniel, had brought his father along. Both were dressed in expensive suits. As they entered the conference room, Daniel raised his voice at Taylor.
Taylor, what are you thinking? Do you really believe you and Kelly will be happy by doing this?
Daniel, I can't take it anymore.
She replied with a trembling voice. Daniel's father, Steve, slammed the table and stood up.
Stop this nonsense. Think about your reputation. There's no way we'll allow this divorce.
Excuse me. Please sit down. Let's begin the discussion.
My husband spoke calmly. I sat beside Taylor and gently held her hand, which was cold and slightly shaking. The lawyer took out documents and began explaining the terms of the divorce. When the amount for alimony and child support was presented, Daniel and Steve's expressions changed. A vein bulged on Steve's forehead, and Daniel clenched his teeth.
This is an outrageous amount. We can't pay that.
Steve shouted.
Taylor, who do you think has been supporting your luxurious lifestyle?
At that moment, the lawyer pulled out a small notebook. It was Taylor's diary, which she had kept daily. But it wasn't an ordinary diary. It contained records of abuse, threats, and financial exploitation. Every detail was meticulously documented. The dates, times, and circumstances. Taylor had recorded her suffering with the accuracy of a case file.
Is this what you call a luxurious lifestyle?
The lawyer's voice was calm but firm. Next, photos from Kelly's kid's smartphone were presented. Among them were pictures of bruises on Taylor's body and hidden snapshots capturing Daniel's violent behavior. Evidence that a 6-year-old girl had secretly prepared to protect her mother. With keen observation, Kelly had tried to protect her mother in her own way. As I looked at the photos, I recalled Kelly's expression that day when she drew bruises on the doll's stomach. Even then, this little girl had already glimpsed the darkness in the adult world.
We can also submit this evidence to the police and to your companies.
The lawyer said quietly.
Of course, if we do, it will significantly affect your public reputation.
The color drained from Daniel and Steve's faces. They were at a loss for words, simply exchanging glances with each other.
This is blackmail.
Steve shouted.
No, it's not.
My husband replied calmly.
It's simply a presentation of the facts. My area of expertise is education, and there's extensive research on the effects of domestic violence on children. Steve, as a corporate executive, I'm sure you know how sensitive companies are to such issues.
Steve fell silent. Indeed, in recent years, with the emphasis on compliance, a scandal involving an executive could be devastating for a company. Domestic violence, in particular, would draw harsh scrutiny from the public eye.
Daniel.
Without changing his tone, my husband continued.
I believe your company also promotes respect for human rights as one of its core values, correct?
Daniel nodded, his face pale. His company especially emphasized social responsibility in its public image. If it became known that a young executive there was a perpetrator of domestic violence, a promotion would be out of the question. He'd be lucky to avoid demotion. In the end, they agreed to all of our terms. The alimony and child support were to be paid in a lump sum, establishing a foundation for Taylor and Kelly's new life.
Taylor, you can't do anything on your own. You'll regret this divorce.
No, I will protect the happiness of Kelly and myself.
She replied calmly but firmly. When she signed the papers, Taylor's hand no longer trembled. After the divorce was finalized, events took an unexpected turn. Instead of acknowledging their wrongdoing, Daniel and Steve began complaining to others, blaming Taylor. They told their coworkers, relatives, and anyone who would listen that Taylor had neglected household duties and failed to discipline Kelly properly. According to them, everything was Taylor's fault. They conveniently left out the fact that they had cornered a single woman and a young child with their oppressive behavior. But their selfish excuses backfired. Instead, their lack of integrity became glaringly obvious, and people around them began to distance themselves. Even those who had initially sympathized with them saw their true nature through their words and actions. The most damaging consequence was Daniel's reputation at work. His company, a major corporation, prioritized humanity as a core value when evaluating employees. Once he became known as a domestic abuser, he was removed from important projects and transferred to a back-office role with no external interactions. Once a promising young talent, Daniel was now shunned by everyone. This back-office position was a clear demotion given his track record. His income dropped significantly, and switching jobs was hardly an option with a history of domestic violence hanging over him. As for Steve, his situation was even more grim. Rumors spread among clients and peers, and he lost credibility as an executive. Forced into early retirement, Steve found himself relying on a pension, unable to handle the sudden income reduction and resorting to living off his savings. Once draped in luxury brands, the two were now buried under debt. Gone was any trace of their former dignified selves, replaced by constant arguments and blame-shifting. Moreover, neither of them could manage basic household tasks or cooking, relying on deliveries and supermarket deli items for meals. Laundry piled up, and they couldn't even manage proper waste sorting. Rumor had it that their once nice home had become a hoarder's den. Witnessing their deteriorating lives, those around them began to imagine the hardship Taylor had endured. Socially isolated and pushed into a corner, Daniel and his father faced the consequences of their own actions. Obsessed with appearances, they had hidden their violence and oppressed the vulnerable, only to ultimately tighten the noose around their own necks. On the other hand, Taylor's condition improved day by day. The peaceful time spent at home gradually softened her expression. The same was true for my granddaughter, Kelly. According to her teacher, Kelly was now more lively during playtime and getting along well with her friends. While working on my dolls, I kept a watchful eye over the two of them. The days of living in fear of violence were now firmly in the past. A year after the divorce, Taylor slowly began to regain her former brightness. The heavy atmosphere that once lingered had vanished, and the house now echoed with Kelly's laughter. Brad adjusted his work schedule at the university to come home as early as possible.
Mommy is smiling.
Warmth filled my chest. One day, Daniel showed up unexpectedly. He said he wanted to speak with Taylor, and my husband, with a cold gaze, led him into the parlor. However, Taylor refused to see him. Instead, my husband and I sat down to handle the situation. Daniel, who once had a haughty attitude, now sat before us, looking defeated and miserable.
I want to start over with Taylor.
He forced the words out. I responded calmly yet firmly. Taylor has started a new life. Please don't interfere with her happiness. Daniel slumped, as if his last hope had slipped away.
I see. I truly regret what I did to Taylor.
Regret colored his words, but it was clear he understood that what had been done could never be undone. By this time, Taylor had started seeing a man she'd met through my husband's colleague, with marriage potentially on the horizon. This man taught psychology at a university and was gently building a relationship with Taylor and Kelly, fully understanding the emotional scars they carried.
I want him to be my daddy. He's so kind, and I love him.
Hearing that Kelly had grown so fond of him reassured us. One day,
Mom, thank you for noticing back then.
those words brought tears to my eyes. As a mother, a part of me still regrets not realizing sooner what she was going through. But Taylor smiled and said, "Thanks to you, both Kelly and I were saved."
The decision we made then was the right one.
As parents, we had hesitated to intervene in our daughter's marital issues. But it was Kelly's small act of courage that gave us the resolve to take action. Recently, Taylor started studying to earn a counseling certification.
I want to help others who are suffering, like I was.
Her words filled me with pride as a mother. If her experiences could support someone else, perhaps they had their own meaning. Kelly has recently become engrossed in drawing. Her artwork is always filled with bright colors, a reflection of her newfound freedom to express herself. Sometimes, she draws with Taylor's new partner. Watching them work seriously side by side, they look like a real father and daughter. Life has its unexpected turns, and sometimes, by turning that corner, we're gifted with a new view. The struggles Taylor and Kelly faced were not in vain. They have this happiness now because they overcame those trials. This spring, Taylor decided to marry her new partner.
I'm getting a new daddy.
Kelly was overjoyed. Though the wedding will be a small one, it's certain to be a beautiful ceremony filled with warmth and love. I watch over this new beginning for my daughter and granddaughter with quiet happiness. Outside the window, cherry blossoms were fluttering in the breeze. With the arrival of a new season, a new happiness is about to blossom for our family as well. The bruises Kelly once drew on her doll will remain as a symbol of a past that will never repeat, quietly etched into our memories. Thank you for listening to our story. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.